Hello, this is Dr. Dan. In this lesson, we are going to address how Jesus was, as a leader, both obedient and resistant to temptation. I think these are really important to understand because many times leaders think that they are in a position to exhibit their role as a leader and delegate and tell people what to do, which is more being a manager, telling people what to do, following rules, versus leading is about vision, is about setting a good example, and on and on. A servant leader, which Jesus definitely was, is an effective leadership style where the leader is there and exhibits a characteristic of being there to serve the followers. Jesus was very effective at doing this, and look at the results that he had. There are many different examples in the Bible of how Jesus was obedient, and the results are right there for you to read about. So I do encourage you to look at the many different examples. For instance, the first example that I could find was immediately after Jesus was in the temple at age 12, and his parents found him, and they said, you need to come home with us, basically. And basically, according to Luke 2:51 to 52, Jesus went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. The word is actually used right there in this version. And his mother kept all these things in her heart, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. I find this particularly interesting of all the various examples because you can see that obedience led to his mother keeping things in his heart. It led to him having increased wisdom and stature, and he was in favor with God and with man. Look at all of the things that occurred due to his obedience. As you go through the Bible, through the Gospels, you'll find many other examples of where people made requests of him, and he was obedient and honored their requests. There is, of course, a practical challenge with this of being a leader, and that is knowing perhaps when to say no. Because obedience, what that does not necessarily mean is doing everything everyone wants you to do. Of course, there are exceptions, and it can be definitely a practical challenge of knowing when to say no. And in that case, a leader perhaps has to be a bit more creative and rely on, like we will talk about in other, as we examine other characteristics of Jesus as a leader, such as relationship building and team building, and being able to not necessarily say no directly, but being able to be a leader and offer assistance in ways such as delegation and asking others for help and some of those various things. So I do recognize the practical challenge of having to say no at times. And so by no means do I think that obedience is something where you must do what everyone says. That's not what we're talking about here. What we are discussing is that ability as a leader to recognize that you are not above everyone else and taking requests from them and simply, telling other people what to do. That you can definitely be obedient to your followers and honor them as a leader. Resistant to temptation is the other half of these characteristics that we're going to examine. And Jesus was definitely resistant to temptation in many different ways. From temptation by the devil in the desert after he got baptized, to perhaps even throughout his ministry until the end when he was crucified, resistant to perhaps run away or use his powers to not get crucified or not admit that he was king of the Jews. I'm sure he had, in addition to where they discuss directly temptation in the Gospels, I am sure he had many, many ongoing examples of temptation. As an example, reflecting back on his first miracle, imagine this, and here's what I love to do as I read the Gospels, is to put myself as best I can in the position of what Jesus may have been going through during certain situations. As an example, he was obviously the most powerful individual in the universe, and he was on this planet, and he was in his earthly form and had his earthly desires. And where is he at? During his first miracle, he's at a party, at a celebration, and he has just turned water into wine. I mean, how popular must this leader be at that point? But instead of sitting around and receiving all the glory from everyone else and all the attention that any of us would receive if we just made water into wine at a party, I mean, you'd be the most popular person, obviously. Well, what did he do? He left. He left that situation. He resisted the temptations that may have had to offer. And he does this consistently throughout the Gospels. As a leader, what can you do? Well, I'm sure you have similar situations. You're praised for being a leader. You're praised for your position. You have many temptations, whether they be financial or power, or perhaps even taking credit because you've done something as a leader, rather than taking that credit and giving it to others, giving it as a gift. Let other people take the credit, because it'll end up coming back to you anyways. You will receive even more so, because people will see you as that type of leader that resists the temptation of taking credit and gives that to others. So there's some practical examples of how resisting temptation can make you a more effective leader. I hope that you learned some practical lessons, as well as learned more about Jesus and these characteristics that he exhibited as a highly effective and the most effective leader in our history of being both obedient and resistant to temptation. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.